You guys ever find yourself in a roguelike where you decide to just pick it up with your friends and then you end up sinking more than 10 hours of your life into it and proceed to basically beat all the content in the game before the week's over? Yeah, that was me with DeadZone Rogue. At least in open access, though it is very much not in open access anymore, and now we're gonna talk about it. DeadZone Rogue is a FPS style shooter roguelike, heavily focused on a shoot and loot style of gameplay, kinda similar to those of Gunfire Reborn or RoboQuest, except this one has a very different take, focusing a bit more on strategy rather than raw movement and just running it down. Going into it, I thought it'd be a pretty decent time, especially with friends, but after playing it for a while and eventually coming back to it now in its 1.0 release, I found that I have quite a few thoughts about it. For any game, let's start with the most important part of the game, the actual core gameplay loop. This game is a lot more strategic and a lot less movement focused than games like Gunfire or RoboQuest, but that's one of its strengths, because one of the most interesting mechanics of this game is you go into each room stealth. What are you aiming at? You can walk around the room, no enemy could see you. I don't even think if you run into an enemy they could see you, but you can go around and scope out high priority targets such as healing drones and shielding drones, and just beat the crap out of them before everything else in the room. And that's what makes this game the most unique, is that one mechanic. And besides that, we have all of our standard stuff. Enemies drop loot. At the end of each level, you get an upgrade of some kind. But the difference is with these upgrades, unlike in RoboQuest or Gunfire, you don't have character-specific upgrades or character-specific abilities. Instead, every character could do whatever they want, just depending on what you get, which you can pick up 3 different upgrades throughout your run. And after you get 3 upgrades, you get additional upgrades that are expansions of one of the 3 original upgrades you get. These upgrades could vary between one called Locked and Loaded, which is just raw gun damage, with the added bonus of whenever you kill an enemy, your offhand weapon gets reloaded. Or stuff like Thunder Soul, which just increases electric damage, but gives the added effect of whenever you proc an electric ability on an enemy, you have an increased crit rate. And of course you can get expansions like that increases damage further or gives you other unique abilities. And of course there's other elements that you can play for. One thing I will say, besides the elements, which is the main build diversity, there's only 2 real ways of actually playing the game, which is shooting at them or running up and meleeing them, which I guess, yeah, is every FPS style roguelike, but I feel like that doesn't have the same flexibilities as games like Gunfire or RoboQuest, which have their unique character abilities that really define how you play. And this is just mainly throw grenades indefinitely, shoot a lot and hit hard, or run up and melee the crap out of them. And one of my pet peeves of this game is in later levels, there are enemies that have shields that are immune to range damage, which is fine, but you're required to melee them. If you're doing a ranged build and your entire gimmick is to not get hit and stay away from them, you're literally required to go in and kill those enemies. And there's not like enemies that negate melee damage. Of course, melee is a more risky strategy unless you have Ghost Knife, because Ghost Knife, after you kill something, you go invisible. Rinse and repeat until room is dead. GG easy. But yeah, I just wish that there was some other way to deal with them, like throwing a grenade would be interesting rather than having to melee them. At least that's just my thoughts. Maybe I'm just a big bubble blowing baby and I'm just too attached to range strategies. Let me know in the comments. I just think it's weird that you can't shoot sometimes in your FPS shooter. I mean, what am I gonna say? I don't fucking know. From gameplay, let's talk about the actual visuals of the game. Visuals is very interesting. I do like the overall sci-fi space style of visuals, and honestly this is very reminiscent of, ironically, Dead Space. I think about Dead Space a lot with this game, especially once you get to the later levels. If you know, you know. But it's a realistic art style where the guns, the enemies, they're planted in realism, which it doesn't give that much stylistic choice, but stuff like the UI and the overall presentation is very clean. I wouldn't say it's end all be all, but it gets the job done, and explosions, muzzle flashes, and how enemies just kind of ragdoll. It's good fun, and everything's cohesive enough that there's not anything really to complain about. The audio, I had to really dig in and listen to it, but I found myself really enjoying it. Shooting and gunfire sound amazing. The overall directional design of the game is very well done. And of course, the most important part of any game to me. The music is actually very interesting. You see in these games, you don't progress from section to section or like zone A, zone B, and zone C like you normally do. Each run is in its own designated zone, and in that zone you have approximately 30 levels to get through. And throughout those, you have designated special rooms that are not completely randomly generated. But as you pass through those rooms, the soundtrack, especially when in combat, actually builds upon itself per each level you go through. So the further you are in the run, the more dynamic the music becomes, which is a very cool touch, if I might add. But going from visuals and audio, let's talk about replayability. We're talking about roguelike. It's the most important part of a roguelike. We gotta talk about whether you're gonna be playing it a lot. And I gotta admit, DeadZone Rogue gives so much replayability from numerous different challenges, each having their own individual difficulties, weapon unlocks, skin unlocks, and it's because of those diversity of challenges, you get to do a lot of weird and interesting builds because you're required to. And it's that kind of challenges and like forcing into a certain build I don't mind too much. And of course, we gotta talk about multiplayer because that's one of the best things about modern roguelikes, in my opinion, is being able to fuck around with friends. And oh boy, can you fuck around with friends. You could do anything in this game with friends, no problems. It's great. It's good fun. The scaling's fine. Definitely, you are a bit more overpowered with friends, but I don't think that's entirely a bad thing. Also, another thing to mention with replayability is there's actual different modes. Like there's a literal zombies mode that they made in the first zone, and each zone has their own unique game mode, which is very interesting as well. Of course, it's not endless. I still have a lot to do. I got all the upgrades basically, minus a few very specific item upgrades. But overall, you're probably asking, would I recommend this game? If you're a fan of the FPS roguelike style and want something a tad more strategic and maybe not as movement based as something like Gunfire Reborn or RoboQuest, it's definitely worth a look, especially if you want to just mess around with friends and you want a bit more realism. And if you're interested in that more realistic art style with honestly a lot darker of visuals, definitely worth a look.